I'll call to order a special meeting of the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, and the City of Victorville. First order is public comment. I have one card under item 1 is Norm Miller.
Mayor, council members, my name is Norman Miller. I just had a couple comments I'd like to make. One is, in looking over the agenda tonight, it kind of reminds me something about comment I'd like to make on my own about LAFCO. To me, they kind of messed us up with the Golden Triangle when they annexed that into this area originally. Kind of messed us up when they put Baldy Mesa and Victor Valley Water into the city of Victorville. Now it sounds like they're trying to mess up things up again with the Oro Grande Northern Triangle area. And I think my personal opinion is that as a comment about Victorville possibly taking over the Northern Triangle or whatever's in there, whatever they want to call it, I was just looking at if I was nearly in debt and I had a lawsuit coming toward me and I was losing my job, I don't think I'd go out and buy a new car or a new house. I think I'd wait until things turned around. And maybe that's what the city of Victorville should do, is just back off a little bit on the Northern Triangle or that area until things become a little better, because I don't think we can afford to take them over now. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else for public comment. Item number 2 is the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second.
Votes from Mayor Cabrialis.
Item number 3, an update of the status of the Northern Sphere of Influence expansion. Mr. Cox?
I'm going to ask Bill Webb to give an introductory to this. He has made at least 2 introductions that I know of to the council on where we're at this time and how it was initiated. It'll be short, but it's necessary because each time we have a meeting, there's always people in the audience who are unaware of the background, and so I'd ask Mr. Webb if he would proceed with that.
Great, thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, council members, Mayor. This will just be kind of a general recollection of how we got here, as Mr. Cox just stated, and why we're here today. Basically, several years ago, approximately 5 years ago, we were looking at updating our general plan about the same time LAFCO was conducting a municipal service review of the high desert. And so pretty much in concert with LAFCO, we had gone back and forth over the last several years to determining not only our general plan of our city proper, but as required, looking at county islands and other county areas that were appropriate for absorption into the city sphere, and into the city itself. And so we've worked back and forth over the last several years, as I said, with LAFCO. The county, they've asked that we take into consideration existing islands, which we have and are doing in all of our future annexations. During that process, we also looked at opportunities and areas where we could expand our sphere. And just for the sake of the audience, there's a difference between the city boundaries and the sphere. The city boundary is the city proper as you know it today, formal boundaries, and we provide all services for the city itself. The sphere is an area that is an area that's worked out in cooperation with surrounding cities or municipalities and the county, and is determined that at some point in the future, this community is determined to be best that area is best served by Victorville, or best served by Adelanto, or best served by Hellendale, et cetera. And along with the other organizations and LAFCO overseeing it, LAFCO will approve city spheres, which extends past the city boundaries, and it's appropriate for, or is determined that it may be appropriate for annexation at a later date. One, because we can best serve that area. Also, because that area will be benefited by the city absorbing it or bringing it into the city boundaries. Having said that, at any meeting, whether you're in the sphere or coming into the sphere, there are meetings held like this where the community can come out and can object, can state their objections. And as Mr. Cox and the council members, I believe, have said, it is not our desire to ever take in any community that does not want to be. And as precedent, really, for I think universally, if not for the most part, the areas that we have taken in have asked to be taken into the city, and at the very least have the majority have requested or supported being taken in and annexed to the city. What we're talking about today is not an annexation. What we've been talking about for the last several years is not an annexation. We have done annexations in the past. We are working with Code Road, all of Code Road. We had numerous neighborhood meetings before the annexation. We worked with the community. We would do so before any annexation in the future. What we're talking about now is expanding the sphere. It's simply a sphere expansion. As part of our general plan, we were obligated in requesting expansion to note those areas that we would likely expand into and to designate those with land uses. As we've discussed in the past, we pretty much knew where the specific plan, Desert Gateway specific plan land uses would be. The rest of the northern expansion, we analyzed and we gave our best guess as to what those land uses would be, and we so designated in the general plan. That is not in concrete. Those were just our best guesstimates. Those were done at a higher intensity than probably the land will be developed, as most of you are familiar with the land up there. It's not going to be easy to develop, and it's not going to be very intense. However, we usually go with the highest intense density possible during our analysis in order to support traffic and other issues so that we can downgrade later. Once you do the EIR, it's actually for environmental reasons. If you do the EIR at the highest density of housing or commercial or industrial, you can always downsize without touching the EIR again, and you can put in single family, and you can put in neighborhood shopping centers, and you can put in warehousing instead. What you can't do is designate something single family and then put heavy industrial in it without doing a whole new environmental. So that's typically the way we plan. Having said that, we really didn't zone the northern area really high density. This includes, by the way, the western annexation all the way out to Coughlin. It includes Code Road, and our discussions with LAFCO also include the county islands that are currently within the city proper. Those have not come up yet, but those will be attached to future annexations, is our understanding with LAFCO and you know, LAFCO's desire. So now we've got like the basics down about what we're doing. We looked at the areas, again, like I said, the western annexation. We have developers basically leading that cause, and they have been working on documents and pushing that forward and working with LAFCO. Those submittals are in. Our submittals with Code Road are in. And the other submittal that we submitted was the northern, what we called the Northern Triangle. That included everything basically between the river and the 15, all the way up originally to Hellendale's boundary. And I don't believe if it was the school boundary or their existing sphere boundary at the time. That was several years ago. We submitted that. Well, at the same time as we submitted all of these things, and we didn't submit them all together, but as we're submitting these and LAFCO is reviewing them and getting comments back, Hellendale also was requested by LAFCO to submit what I believe, I may have misspoken, but I believe because they were doing the review of the entire high desert, all communities were asked to give our information. And at around that time, Hellendale also submitted a sphere expansion, which came south and overlapped our northern boundary. So what we're talking about here is not whether property should be in county or not. What we were talking about was with which municipality could best serve the county area that is between basically Hellendale to the north and Victorville to the south. And we felt that we could best serve this much, and they felt they could best serve this much, and hence the overlap. That's where we were a couple of years ago. LAFCO got both of those submittals and said, well, wait a minute, you can't both take over the same area. And what I mean by take over, again, it's a sphere expansion. It's not an annexation to the city. It is to plan for future growth. A side note, the reason that's important is the county and LAFCO are concerned that if development goes in there, that they are conducive to what the cities are planning. Because 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, if those areas are annexed into that jurisdiction and they're not compatible, then it's all for naught. Why are we developing those things? So the county, if within our sphere, will route projects to us for our comment. If it's within Hellendale's sphere, it'll route projects for their comment. So we can try to bring it along the lines of our development standards as close as possible during the development of that area, so that we don't end up with county annexations that, like I said, do not comply with our current code, whether it's development, design standards, building codes, any of those. So it's a cooperative effort between all of us, and there's a good reason for it. Anyway, so there's this overlap between Hellendale and us. County notifies us of that, or LAFCO does, and says, you guys need to work together. I believe the direction actually came from even the supervisor's office. You guys need to work together. Simultaneously, there's this little side deal with Adelanto and the patch over the airport that we've discussed several times that you're aware of. That's a separate issue, but it all ties in. We also included that in our annexation, or a sphere expansion, our sphere expansion proposal. And LAFCO said, well, Adelanto needs to be on board with this, basically, get with them. About 6 months ago, I'd say, Jim, I'm not sure, around that time, we met with all of the communities with the understanding that we were asked to or directed to come to some kind of an understanding where at least we were in agreement. Mr. Cox set up a meeting, and we had representatives from Hellendale. We met with Adelanto separately in another meeting, and what we came to was what we had called and presented to you as the compromise map. The compromise map, and I'm not sure if Brandon, he doesn't have them. Okay, there we go. Is that the compromise map, Chris? Yes, it is. Okay, if you look at that map, our initial proposal, or one of our first proposals, included the red striping and the blue striping. When we met on the compromise map, between Adelanto, Hellendale, and Victorville, we all agreed on this. As you can see, the red striping is Hellendale coming down, so they pulled back from their last proposal. The blue striping is Hellendale going up. Us coming down, we pulled back from our original proposal, and Adelanto pulling back. And you can see there's a stripe over that section right above the airport. That's yellow section. I'm bad at this, 1016. I can't tell what that number is, but you can see it attached to the blue there. That becomes blue also. And all three organizations agreed. This council recommended that we submit this if everyone was in agreement. And Hellendale said the same, and the Hellendale's board said the same, and the City of Adelanto Council also blessed this. So we submitted this. Well, simultaneously, unbeknownst to perhaps, and LAFCO representative may speak on this, to them, while we were doing this, they were also taking a look at it and looking at constraints. What we didn't consider in this was natural resources and constraints. And the LAFCO representatives can speak on behalf of that. They have concerns. Mining is first and foremost probably, as well as natural habitat. We felt that the city has always supported mining, has their best interest at heart. We felt that we had zoned it appropriately, open space, which allows mining. Everything that we were aware of, we zoned accordingly. However, LAFCO raised some concerns about that once they produced their map. And if I could have, do we have the next slide? Do we have the LAFCO one also? I don't know if we do, Brandon?
Yep.
Okay, there you go. Well, we were wrapping all this up and getting everybody's signatures on the one map. LAFCO was creating this, And what this was this was trying to get Hellendale's recommendation as well as ours, and come to some kind of a, suggestion from LAFCO on what can best be served while still maintaining and preserving the natural resources. So that big white chunk that's cut out in the middle, that is basically the, and forgive me, monkey flower, what is it? Mojave monkey flower preserve area, as well as mining area. Now there is something out there that's an environmental document that's been in the works for over 10 years, well over 10 years, and that's the Mojave West Mojave Plan. Sorry about that. And that we felt would preserve the natural resources, not the mining, but the actual resources. So we weren't really concerned about that. We thought we had the mining, the cooperation of the mining industry behind us also. We did not know that I should say we had not heard any different than there was support, I guess, for us moving forward from the mining industry. At least we hadn't heard any comments to the opposite of that. So we were moving forward. Well, LAFCO took this, and LAFCO, this is their tentative submittal, counter submittal to our application, Hellendale's application, and Adelanto's agreement on our compromise plan. We had some concerns about this. And even though this map actually shows, well, let me start on the very top left. The problem with the very top left is LAFCO, unbeknownst to LAFCO, we had made this agreement with Adelanto for that section above the airport so that we could go 2 sections up. And that way we would not have a peninsula sticking out above the airport in order to preserve that area and the sanctity of flights and the operations of the airport in the future. It was important. It's under the flight pattern of the airport, and knowing that there will be more flights in the future, we thought it was important to preserve that area, not to have residential, not to have the conflicts that other airports have had throughout Southern California and throughout the country, actually, when neighboring communities build out. So what this lacks, and LAFCO is agreeable, I'll get to that, I guess, after, or Jim will. What this lacks is that little stub above to the left, above the purple, above the blue. That yellow area we had as our sphere, and then one step above that. We'll show you the other map again in a minute. So that's missing that. What it does contain is, if you look to the right of this map and you look at that hard green line that steps, that is the Desert Gateway specific plan. So the Desert Gateway specific plan is currently within our city, within our approved sphere, and within ours and LAFCO's recommended sphere. So the Desert Gateway specific plan, as adopted, as it stands right now, we're all in agreement. There's no problem on that side. So the right side, for all practical purposes of the specific plan, is fine. Left side we would need adjusted for the airport. And that's only looking at this map. This was not our proposal or our recommendation. This is just our analysis of this. The other thing about this is, when we first got it, we had already heard that there were concerns about the mining industry and the mining land. Well, this does have TXI in our recommended sphere. However, TXI has recommended that they not be in there. And so our last concern, and we brought it to council before, and Mr. Cox represented it to all the powers involved at our meeting a week or two ago, that this city sees and recognizes TXI and Oro Grande as one community, and feels they are interdependent, socioeconomically interdependent, and that they should stay together. If they wish to come into our sphere, we welcome both, was what staff put out. If they wish not to, then they both need to stay together wherever they go. What we've got, I believe, that LAFCO has been informed by TXI that they wish not to be in our sphere. We've had several members of the Oro Grande community come to us at hearings such as this and state that they don't want to be in our sphere. Our recommendation is, if this is what's going before the supervisors, and if the supervisors are approving this, as I stated, and if TXI has requested to be pulled out of the sphere, that the community stay together, and Oro Grande, the majority of at least, remains with TXI. Wherever TXI goes, Oro Grande should go. It's all one community. And like I said, it's interdependent. The revenue off of TXI should go towards infrastructure, whether it does today or not. It was built, part of that, a large part of Oro Grande was built as a company town. It has a history of a company town, of an old company town. It has the infrastructure of an old company town. And those two entities should stay together wherever they go. We welcome both with open arms if they want to come. If they don't, they can remain in the county, and that's fine. There's been no pressure by the city to pull Oro Grande into the city proper. Again, this isn't even that step. This is the city sphere, which is just planning for the future. It would stay in the county. So again, if I could back up one slide, please, Brandon. That is the compromise plan map. That is what we have submitted, what staff has submitted to LAFCO. That is what Helendale, Adelantos, and Victorville submittal will be. That is what will be heard by the county supervisors at LAFCO. And then next slide again. This plan with our recommendations from the last meeting to include the Adelanto yellow section above the blue left corner and stepping it up one more segment and to remove both TXI and Oro Grande is the city's request for the LAFCO recommendation. This is LAFCO's recommendation as it stood a week and a half ago. Our only request to this map was to bring the magenta or purple on the left-hand side up even with what's on the right-hand side, straight across, and cover that little yellow square above the airport, and cut out TXI and Oro Grande if they so wish to be removed. And that's basically it, but Jim can expand on the meeting that he held. He did so at the council's direction, brought the entities together, and we thoroughly discussed all of these issues, but that's a general update of how we got here, what the process is, and what we've got on the table today.
Very silly question. This white section, you said that's going to stay in limbo because of the monkey flower?
Natural resources which involve the Mojave monkey flower, that's not the only one, but that's what it's known for, is the large strip on the right. The area on the left half of it is mining resources, which we felt we fully protect and can handle. But again, as I said, TXI has and they can speak to that, has requested that they be omitted from our sphere and remain with the county, unfortunately.
Is that an endangered species, this flower, this monkey flower?
Serves this endangered species, yes. Food.
Thank you. I never heard of it, so.
Yeah, I know. There's a bunch of those out there that.
Is it? Oh, okay. That's why I never heard of it, right?
Let me see. There was no intention to develop, even in the map, prior map, there was no intention necessarily to develop that area. A lot of it's already preserved, it's already protected. You would spend a lifetime going through environmentals if you even tried. The actuality is, it serves as a buffer. Oh, thank you. But what do? Oh, okay. If I could, I'll show you like this. Now you can hand it around. This is basically, the green is the open space of all of that. So it shows that we did do open space. We have single family or housing along this edge, and the specific plan here. We inadvertently cut into a separate mining operation, I think here, and something else, but we can always downgrade. There was no intent to develop. We were doing this as we're doing the general plan. So we attempted to basically copy what the county already had in place. So the intent was to preserve it. And by the way, open space, as we stated before, mining operations are allowed. The intent was always to preserve it, but it acts as a buffer from encroaching development. One of the things that we did discuss with Helendale that we felt very comfortable between us and Helendale, and we had county representatives at all of these meetings, by the way. I'm not sure if they were at the Adelanto, one of the Adelanto meetings, but I can say that they were at the other meetings, I believe all of them. And one of the things that we discussed was we wanted to find a comfortable dividing line so that we don't have to do this year after year after year. If you recall that the going to LAFCO several years ago, it was a struggle. It was a tough time for us. And I don't know that it helped relations between us and our neighboring communities. So we actually wanted to do what the purpose of the municipal service review is to plan for 15, 20 years down the line. We thought we accomplished that with this, and we felt safe in that there's a dividing line. One of the problems with this map, and we can speak to it at the LAPCO hearing, is this land is now an island, which is against LAPCO policy, a huge island between two jurisdictions. And what happens down the road? I mean, we have islands right now that we are being pressured to take where there are a lot of development and code enforcement issues. This will continue developing along county standards, and at some point, we might be told we have to. You know, the next recession, we don't have money to support this. You know, something else happens. I mean, and Hellendale, what happens if in the future Victorville wants to march northward into that whole area? Or Hellendale wants to come down? What if Hellendale wants to preserve everything down and block some of the development of the Desert Gateway plan? This land is right up against that. What if our interests go northward and interrupt something that they're involved in? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We wanted an end-all solution and felt that from a staff level, the compromise map was something agreeable. As we told you, no one got what they wanted, but everybody was pretty satisfied with what they needed, and we felt that we followed LAPCO's direction in who could serve what. There are mountain ranges in there. We looked at the flow. We looked at everything in determining that and came to that agreement. So we're happy with our submittal, but you know, we did want to comment on their submittal, and the comments I just said were, if LAPCO's going to submit this, please consider TXI and Oro Grande is one community, and on the left side, consider our agreement with Adelanto and take us up 2 sections. And that meeting was held with LAPCO representatives, county representatives, Hellendale representatives, and us, and we were all in agreement to, if this is approved, at least make these adjustments at that time. And I don't have a map showing the adjustments, but it's basically what I explained. So, you know, that's where we're at. But I did want to make it clear we're talking about 2 different things. This is still the LAPCO submittal, and it may be modified. I believe, I haven't gotten confirmation exactly from them, but I believe the understanding was they were agreeable to looking into the issues that we had on it. This is their recommendation. The previous slide, which is the compromise, is our staff recommendation, tri-community compromise map. And that is what's going forward, and LAPCO's bringing their own form of this, you know, of the last map forward.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
I'd ask to put the compromise map up again, please. I want to speak at that. On the compromise map. There we go. Thank you. If you will notice the second, this is really difficult because I can point it out, but if you go all the way to the left side, the white, which is section 21114, that's in the city limits, and the area to the north is immediately north abutting the airstrip is Adelanto. We have met with Adelanto, and there is an agreement to withdraw that from Adelanto and allow Victorville to have the control, and primarily it's an issue of prohibiting encroachment for uses that would not be compatible with the landing strip. Interestingly enough, that is almost the same language that TXI reminded us that they did not want an encroachment that would allow development that was not compatible with the mining and cement industry. We understand that. There is a notch out of section, well, just you can see the little red notch. That is a ranch that apparently had protested being included in Victorville sphere some years ago, and I believe different council members have discussed that, and there is an agreement that that would remain in the Hellendale sphere of influence. Therefore, when we arrived at the compromise, there was a little notch that provided for the ranch. If you go to the, no, while I'm still there, don't change the map. If you go to the northeast portion, when we met with Hellendale, LAFCO rep, and county reps, we wanted to go to Wild Wash because of the studies that we had completed. And about a mile or something short of maybe a mile and a half before you get there, there is a break in the topography and drainages to the northeast of Wildwash and then to the northwest. And there was an agreement that it could be developed. There's going to have a difficult time for services. There would be a need to pump for sewage. And so part of that compromise that was very seriously discussed with all the parties is how we finally arrived at that. And you'll notice that Wildwash now would be approximately 2 miles north of the blue line, or north of the city limits. But that line is where the topography does not drain back to the Victor Valley, but drains toward the Barstow area and then back to the Hellendale area. That's how that compromise map was arrived at. And when after this meeting was over, approximately within a week or two, we received word that individuals and industry located in the blue-slashed area had notified the county supervisor of their concern about being in the Victorville sphere and felt that mining and cement should remain in a county or an unincorporated area. And at that time, it was described as a rural area as opposed to a developing or urban area. We met with different individuals in the area, particularly TXI, and they indicated their appreciation for working with Victorville on several issues, but did request that we revise the map to exclude their territory, their plant, and their mining operations, and felt that there was a lot of issues, that this was not a singular issue to be discussed at this time, that there was a lot of issues that they would want to talk about, including the bill by our Congressman McKeon, including mine claims, including land that's owned by the Bureau of Land Management that they have mining claims on or have leases on, and felt that that was going to be very complicated, and at the speed Victorville was moving, it would not be a good idea to include any of that land, and they requested to be omitted from that. They indicated that at this point in time, they clearly understood Victorville's request. While it was friendly discussions, that when it came down to it, if need be, they would file an opposition letter with LAFCO indicating that they would, as a landowner, they would have to oppose this. And we indicated that our preference is to be a good neighbor, to respond to their wishes where we can, and to compromise with the county, which is where they're located, when we can't. But on the other hand, we don't intend to move forward on any kind of a plan where the property owners and the residents would be opposed to it. That compromise map, therefore, then speaks for itself. When that was presented to the City Council, there were some concerns expressed by the council members, and the reason we're rehashing this is because there is a lot of issues and a lot of misinformation, and we're trying to get this straightened out once and for all. Shortly after we had this discussion, we had deadlines to file, and council had a division of thought in regard to where our map should be, and a request to move it northerly. We indicated that to move it back to where the original request would be, probably end up with the whole thing failing, or at least a good chance. It was a majority vote of the council to go ahead and authorize staff to go ahead and file, but to continue to meet to see if other compromises were available that would meet everybody's needs. Now, if we could go to map 2. So this map actually was a staff map that I had not seen until after we had the compromise map, but I understand that it actually existed before the compromise map. And the only place that we really have a disagreement is north of the Air Force Base. But I believe in a subsequent meeting with Hellendale and the other parties involved, the agreement is to move that line 1 mile northerly to match up with the compromise map and provide an additional 1 mile buffer from the north end of the runway that would be protected by the city. The other issue that came about was a discussion by TXI, at least one member, maybe more, representing Oro Grande and the county, was that in fact Oro Grande was a community of interest that should stay together. And what I have said to the council and what I have said in the various meetings that I've attended, that Oro Grande is in need of municipal type services. They don't like the word municipal because it sounds like we're saying we can only provide them, but they're the kind of services where you have water, you have sewer, you have street, you have needs, you have need for fire protection and so on. And the money that's going to come forward to any governmental entity is from the actual TXI operations of the plant. I think that's fairly recognizable. And therefore, it should be held together as a community of interest. And that Victorville would have a very difficult time considering the annexation of Oro Grande, even if the people requested it, if it didn't include the TXI operation, which would provide the money to provide the service. I do not see the majority of the individuals that I have talked to in Oro Grande want to remain in the county area, do not want to become a part of the city's sphere, which they see sometime in the future, 5, 10, 15 years, becoming a part of the city. They would like to wait and see on that. Those who are opposed or are really opposed, those who are kind of for it would still like more information and have time to approve it, have time to see the proof that the city can manage its own affairs. And TXI does not want to be a part of the operation. So we have asked in a meeting that we had with a lot of individuals that's involved that the counties, that the SLAF code map that you have in front of you be modified to exclude TXI and Oro Grande. And the boundary then west of be expanded northerly, and the rest of it would remain the same. And on that map, which is supported by the LAFCO staff, and we believe the county representative, and I can't speak for him, but it's my understanding, and also in agreement by Hellendale that the LAFCO staff map with those modifications would be acceptable to all the parties. At the last meeting, I was going to discuss this with the council and discovered that we didn't have it agendized to discuss. That's why I asked that this be continued so that we could have a study session and discuss this in detail because of the massive amount of information. For council's information and the public's, this was scheduled to be heard in these council chambers April the 21st and has now been rescheduled to June 16 and at 5 p.m. And I think everyone is in agreement that it cannot be extended beyond that. It must be heard. This thing has been going on for years, and so we're doing our best to have the final agreement to the staff as soon as possible to prepare the paperwork. On March 29, we had representatives from the city, from planning, from Hellendale, from the county, from LAFCO, from the supervisor. Let's see, we had TXI and I guess all the parties involved, including TRED, that were in the room when we talked about these issues. And as far as I know, all the individuals from the technical point of view are in agreement with this particular map. And that's all the information. I have more information, but I would continue to bore you if I tried to explain it. But I think that covers all the bases of all the information that's been discussed and reported on to date.
Your questions to staff, Terry?
I don't have any questions. I have some comments when it's comment time, but I don't have any.
No, you know what? I'm going to leave my two comments instead of asking staff.
Questions? We'll start with on this side.
I don't have any questions.
I mean comments.
Comments. Well, I think if all the parties got together on March 29th and technically came to an agreement, then that's what our city staff has asked for certain amendments to be made to the LAFCO map here to include those different sections, and then remove TXI and Oro Grande, that's what should go forward. I'm supportive of that. I hope that LAFCO staff is supportive of that. It sounds like all the entities involved have, again, come to an agreement, and it's time to move this thing forward and be done with it.
I agree with Ryan, which we should include that extended over the airport. Did you say a mile, Jim?
It's an additional mile.
An additional mile?
Yes. But it does exclude the, I forget what the name of the ranch is, Palisades Ranch, I believe is the name.
Yeah, there where
And
that
that's that little area that comes down,
Cut
it
out.
would exclude that area, yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
We're doing comments, right? Okay, this is my comment time now, in other words, representing just myself. Can I have map number 1 up again? Somebody back there flipping them for us? There's only 2. Okay, there you go. The original proposal, purely from a land use standpoint, is a perfectly good map and the one that we ought to be adopting. I do not believe that Hellendale should be in this game at all right now. There should be no expansion of their sphere of influence. They have 100 square miles around unincorporated area where it's 10,000 people, whether they're a city in 10 years or not. Doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with the ability to serve that real estate and that property to the north of Victorville, northeast of Victorville there. So our application that covered all of that, all those land use issues, whether it's mining, whether it's the environmental issues, the delivery of services when and if that property develops anytime soon is more appropriately centered first in the city of Victorville and its capabilities. Second, though the county has certainly shown a reluctance to that, would have a far better ability to deliver services out along the 15 than Hellendale, whether Hellendale is there's 6,000 citizens or so, 7,000. I'm sorry, I don't want to dish your population count out there, but whatever that amount is, that unincorporated area would not have the ability to deliver those services. It would be quite a stretch of their resources under any circumstances in the next 20 years, let alone the next decade. We've got a project, the Desert Express, coming down the freeway now. I don't know when that property up there to the north is along the 15 is going to develop, but my guess is it's going to develop in the next 10 years. And whether you have a high spot there and water runs downhill doesn't really matter at all. You can drop wells and put your independent service entities in play there, regardless of the high spot there. So my preference is that Hellendale has no expansion to their sphere of influence at this time. But in a spirit of compromise, I would suggest that Victorville, the dark blue area that you're looking at right now, is our application, that you leave that hatched red area to the southern extension of Hellendale in the county and do not put it in play at this time and see what happens 10 years down the road. And if Victorville is ready to go or the county or Hellendale is ready to go, then put it in play at that time. If people are there and they need the services and they're looking around for who can deliver them, guess what? It's probably going to be Victorville. So I could live with the dark blue area as our application up there, provided that the hatched area stays in the county and not is annexed into Hellendale's sphere of influence. Now, if you'll flip to the second map again, please. With respect to this hole, if you will, in the middle of our application plan, we can protect the environment, we can protect the mining interests and everything else, whether that was in our sphere of influence or the county sphere of influence. There's no legal issue there at all. Should be no fear in terms of preserving that component of it. So if TXI and Oro Grande feels that they are not comfortable moving into our sphere right now, leave them in the county, and I would go to LAFCO and support that, holding that in there. I still do not believe that it's the best planning use for the real estate there, but if that's what Oro Grande and TXI wishes, we have always honored that request in the past, and I see no reason for us to change now. So with respect to this map, with the exception of the extensions of Hellendale to the freeway and to the south there, I could support that with preserving that hole in that application. But again, I come back to the resources of 400,000 people in the Victor Valley that will grow to 1 million probably in the next 15 years or so, and the potential up that 15, it's an incredible encroachment upon the resources and of the people that need to be in play. And it is not an unincorporated area out there in the middle of their region. They have plenty of real estate at this time. This is not good land planning decisions. This denies every aspect that LAFCO is charged with doing. It's simply a political compromise is all it is. So I can't support that, and I won't support that, and I will stand up and argue in any venue that compromise is not legitimate. What I could live with is leaving it in the county and not allowing those southern extensions of Hellendale's sphere to be in play at all. That I could live with, but I cannot live with the idea that those folks out there have the resources or the vision or the financial strength to deal with that real estate, especially up to 15, which is in play now as we speak. So that's my comments. I can live with this map without the extension of the southern intrusion of Hellendale's into that.
If I could have map number 1. I am concerned that we are creating another Mountain View Acres, Code Road type of problem. We won't be here to have to live through it, but the folks who come after us will. And you just have to look at what creating islands does in terms of neighborhood relationships and the growing need to deal with requirements for services. We're having people on our periphery right now that are not in the city now wanting municipal services. Sooner or later, the area that we're talking about as a carve-out will want municipal services. We're going to have to deal with that, or somebody's going to have to deal with it. So I start out with just asking the practical public policy question: is creating another island within the city of Victorville really a good public policy planning decision? And for me, I would suggest that it isn't. The whole idea behind establishing a sphere, from my perspective, is the long-range vision of what's going to happen to an area and how will it logically grow and how will municipal services logically be extended. I, for one, think that should be the overriding consideration. Good planning, good public policy. I'm not sure that just compromising to avoid controversy is good public policy. That said, this map is the product of the jurisdictions who are most affected, sitting down, negotiating, compromising, and coming up with a plan that avoids the potential jurisdictional conflicts, and I think sends a signal that the people in the Victor Valley can work together, can receive what's in the valley's best interest instead of just parochial best interests. I am concerned. Now, if we could go to slide number 2. I have said, and I will say again, I have no interest. In fact, I would prefer that Oro Grande not become a part of the city of Victorville. If I had to vote tonight, I would vote no for Oro Grande becoming a part of the city of Victorville. They have their own lifestyle, they have their own needs, they have their own preferences, and I think they should be left alone and allowed to pursue their destiny in whatever fashion they deem appropriate. And I have said before in these hearings that I respect TXI's reluctance and their concern. I believe that adequate provisions could be made to safeguard encroachment into their legitimate mining operations, but that's not the issue that's before us. But when I look at the carve-out, people ought to bear in mind that if I've done my math right, we're carving out something in excess of 17,000 acres of land, and we're, in essence, saying that 17,000 acres in the heart of the Victor Valley, in the most rapidly and growing area and the most dynamic area, will be basically condemned to staying exactly the way it is. I don't think that's good public policy, and I don't think it's good planning. I think TXI's legitimate concerns could be addressed without setting aside 17,000 plus acres. Go back and think about why we started down this path. We started down this path in order to develop the Desert Gateway specific plan, and we did that in order to develop and facilitate the construction of the southern terminus of the Desert Express project. Thousands of jobs will be impacted by that project. I am concerned that the decisions, at least some of the choices that are being considered, could materially and negatively affect the Desert Gateway specific plan, and in turn the whole concept of the Desert Express and its southern terminus in Victorville. I think we have to come to grips with the reality that we are not the only game in town. And if we make it too burdensome, if we make it too restrictive, if we end up through just getting along with everybody, creating a disincentive for the southern terminus to be built in Victorville, it will go somewhere else. I'm not speaking for Desert Express, and they have not, to my knowledge, expressed those kinds of concerns. But having lived with this whole concept from its inception, I am concerned that we potentially are setting about on a course of conduct that could materially and negatively affect probably the most significant development project in the history of the city of Victorville and for a long time to come. If we go back to the first map, that's a compromise between the people most directly affected, and that's the 400,000 people or 500,000 people that live in the Victor Valley. That's a deal we made, and that's a vote of this council to lock arms with Helendale and Adelanto, and in my opinion, we ought to honor that commitment. If a decision is made to break that commitment, then I think we ought to sit down with Helendale and Adelanto and renegotiate a compromise that we all can live with and feel comfortable with. I hate to see the tail wagging the dog, but there's elected officials that ultimately are supposed to make the decisions for their jurisdictions and for the sister cities that surround us. And this is a deliberative process, well thought out by our staff. I commend Bill Webb and his team for working around the conflicting issues and sometimes lack of direction from this council. I think you've done a great job. But I am concerned about the public policy issues that
Thank you.
I have a question, and Mr. Cox.
Yes.
You did indicate that the last meeting between all the interested parties regarding the LAFCO proposal, that there was an agreement? Is that correct?
Yes, I would characterize it as an agreement only because we needed to meet with all the interested parties to find out what was acceptable, not acceptable. We agreed that Oro Grande is a community of interest and should stay together with TXI. TXI has indicated that if necessary, they would really openly and staunchly oppose the encroachment, which told us that the compromise ought to be to eliminate TXI and Oro Grande in the cement area from this proposal. And I think everyone in the room agreed to that. I have talked with representatives of TXI. I have indicated that our zoning ordinance would provide for the mining operation. It's interesting because they were under the impression that it would not. But there is the public perception that cement mining is a more rural kind of activity and probably doesn't belong into cities, although the cement plant at D Street has been in the city for years and years and years. There's always two sides to this, but when we're trying to reach a deadline and try to reach an agreement, I did not feel that it would put Victorville in good stead with anyone to insist that we move forward with the sphere, because the only argument that we would have is that, well, we're not annexing, but the whole idea of a sphere is who can provide the service sometime in the future. And therefore, while there's not an immediate plan to annex, it does provide that development in the area then would come to Victorville for the comments, so that there would be some input. And at the present time, that's not requested. I don't think there's a wholesale opposition from residents, because we do have inquiry from residents. I've said this before in regard to the high cost that they're paying for water and sewer. And when they found out what our cost of the citizens of Victorville were, they were immediately interested, because, as one lady said, it's not worth $600 a year to. It's not worth they're paying $600 a year more just to stay in Oro Grande, and that's the difference in the sewer cost alone. We don't know why, but that's it. But you do those kind of cost comparisons on an annexation, and you do the cost comparisons on an annexation not on a sphere. The sphere is, can you provide? Annexation is at what cost? But it didn't seem appropriate for staff to say, no, we're going to take the stand, because I think that nothing would move forward. And then there's the chance, I think we talked about political realities, if the LAFCO staff provides a well in-depth reasoned paper for all the reasons of why their map should be approved, and the majority of the LAFCO board agrees, there is the possibility that you end up with nothing you like if you're not willing to make the compromise with all the people sitting at the table. So in that sense, we tried to come to an agreement where no one was in opposition to what was before them. And this map, with the changes that I had recommended, and we talked about with Oro Grande and TXI, and north of the base on the west side, I believe, I'm pretty positive that everyone in the room had agreed that that would be a good map to move forward on.
I also understand, and this is for Mr. Bill Webb, that the specific plan is included in the proposed LAFCO? Yes. Okay, it's covered then? Yes. Okay. Well, based on the information that Mr. Cox has related, as my opinion, is that the first map, or Exhibit A, is the ideal thing that we should be working for. But things are not always, as they seem. There are other things that come into play. I think the LAFCO proposal, with the changes that staff would recommend, if those can be applied, then I could support that. But there is a question why, and maybe LAFCO can reply, why you know, when we talk about annexation or sphere of influence, we always try to set up some kind of line or border, and this is kind of has a lot of zigs and zags in it that's kind of not in keeping with what we've always thought that LAFCO would want.
In relation to the map that, if you can go to the second one, which is the LAFCO staff proposal that we discussed in January when you were doing your compromise, the issue for this exclusion relates to the very tenets of LAFCO law and the preservation and the guiding away from open space, which includes mineral resources and habitat preservation lands, from urban or municipal service providers. That is one of the very basic requirements and tenets of LAFCO law. And when we were looking at your proposal and identifying the mineral resources and the MRZ 2A, 2B, it makes your head spin with little blobs all over the map. They are significant in this area. So LAFCO staff began to evaluate the location of those mineral resources and habitat lands that we are supposed to exclude or guide development away. And that is the map that is shown in this, the LAFCO staff proposed. This map does include all of CSA 42. CSA 42, which includes the TXI plant, is what we have at LAFCO at least understood to be the Oro Grande community. We have been informed by a myriad of letters and petitions and other things that Oro Grande is much larger than that. But we kept CSA 42 together in its entirety in the sphere of influence that we were proposing for the purpose of urban service providers. A portion of CSA 42 is already within the city's boundaries and has been maintained. And your sphere of influence currently includes roughly half of the land area of 42, but not the assessed valuation. So those are the reasons for the map that was drawn in this way. We did meet with city staff and the other representatives to go over. And the issue on our map here for the north of the airport, we did not include that territory because at the time the map was done, Adelanto had said that they had rescinded their support for a sphere change. We have since, when you filed your applications on March 1st with LAFCO staff, that included a sphere proposal to amend the sphere of influence for the city of Adelanto to reduce it and to exclude territory currently a part of the city. So at the meeting on, I believe it was March 29th, we agreed that given that situation, we could support the extension 2 miles north, abutting the compromise boundary that you drew in that general area. But that is the reason for this large exclusion in the interior of your sphere request. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I do. I didn't know I was going to have a shot at you up here at the microphone. The comment and the only rational comment that I can think of for the as you're looking at that map, the blue area, hatched area extending Hellendale to the 15 was the high spot coming off of that corner some way, and I visually know what it is that you're talking about down there, and you've got a low geographical area next to the freeway over there, but don't you also have a mountain that pretty much abuts the other side of that light blue hatched area so that if...
It goes around the base of it as close to parcel boundaries as possible, yes.
Ma'am?
The territory on the eastern side along Wild Wash Road is and that's
right.
what you're talking about. The boundary at the section line there is about the high spot, and the boundary as drawn goes along or essentially along the base of the mountain along the other side to the existing Hellendale boundary in that area. The mountain, as much as possible given parcel configurations, has been excluded.
So for Hellendale to deliver service to that area, if somebody wanted to set up business there in the next 10 years, they're still going to have to go over high ground to get to the low ground.
The same principle that you were discussing earlier about a standalone facility could be handled and operated by Hellendale just as it could have been by the city.
Provided they had the resources to do it.
or the developers has the resources to do
Well,
it here.
Victorville's 110,000 population and growing, and Hellendale's whatever they are, and you know better than I. Still doesn't make any sense. That little bit of rational thought doesn't equate to expanding the sphere of influence to the 15 there. It ought to be left in the county, because the county would have, second to the city, the county would be the one best equipped to deliver service there before Hellendale, which is an unincorporated community, and they'll probably be a city in the next 10 years or so. I don't doubt that.
Whether or not Hellendale incorporates as a city, they can stay a community services district for a number of years. There's no requirement that they look towards incorporation. But there's a possibility, but that was the rationale for the staff's design of that.
Thank you. Well, as far as I'm concerned, when we talk about Oro Grande and TXI not wanting to be, well, not annexed, but come into the sphere of influence of the city of Victorville, we've had a longstanding policy that we will not infringe on anyone that does not want to, be involved with the city or become part of the city in the future. So this will take care of that. With the changes for the airport, the protection of the north end, and the protection of our specific plan, I would support this proposal when it comes time to vote on it. We do have 3 cards. Dorothy Miller.
Dorothy Miller. I have a little problem with this. I know Oro Grande has come here. They do not want to be in the sphere of influence with Victorville. I can't really blame them. Victorville has not done a good job. They have got us in the hole so bad that we'll never get out. And it just really bothers me to see this going on, and we're going to take more property in. But, hey, drive down Bear Valley Road from 15 and 395 and see how much work we've done and how well the city is working right now. It's not good. And I really, really feel we don't need another donut hole. We've already got one, and they want out of it. They don't want to have anything to do with Victorville. And, I can't blame the people. You guys sit up there. You don't look what the people want or what they need. We can just go ahead and keep taking more property in and not maintaining things that we have to take care of. Thank you.
Thank you. G.A. Clark.
I hope you'll excuse me for not being too presentable, but when you work all day and you have a 5 o'clock meeting, it's pretty tough to get home and get spiffed up like you guys look.
Please pull the mic up, please.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
You talk about TXI and Oro Grande. You're talking about just the little town and the plant that doesn't want in, so you're willing to exclude them?
When they talk about Oro Grande and TXI, the LAFCO staff is talking about the whole boundary of CSA 42, as I understand it.
Well, most of us don't know what CSA 42 is, and most of the maps that LAFCO has provided, and these maps here, don't tell people much, unless maybe you're a surveyor and you know where all those sections are, because you've been all over the country. You need to provide better maps with better boundaries so that people know what you're talking about. Now, it sounds to me like you're talking about leapfrogging over TXI and Oro Grande and trying to take the rest of the river area up to at least as far as Palisades and maybe farther, although I can't really tell because the map is so poor. All those people up there consider themselves Oro Grande, and they don't want any part of it either. I've seen what cityhood has done to Hesperia. They've ruined it. I lived in Hesperia for 40 years, and I finally had to escape to my property in Oro Grande. People don't want anything to do with the city out there. And you talked about you had meetings with all the people involved. Well, I never got any notification of any meeting, and I'm involved, it looks to me like. But the little guy, you guys just want to trample over and, excuse my language, but piss on him. And I don't think that it's right. And you said that you don't want to take in anybody that doesn't want to be taken in. And we all know that a sphere of influence is just the first step to annexation. Otherwise, you would not be bothering with it. So if you don't want to take anybody that doesn't want in, then you should look at the statistics of people, that whole area, that have indicated that they don't want any part of
Mr.
Victorville.
Clark, you have 30 seconds left.
Okay. You should pay attention to those people. And the most productive thing for you to do right now would be make a resolution to drop the application for the sphere of influence up along the river, because nobody wants it that lives there. And I thank you for listening to me.
Lee Dorgan.
Good afternoon. I'm just wondering why you still want from west of the highway over to the river. I mean, you're worried about uses not compatible with the airport, but it's a floodplain, and it is a sustainable development area, so there aren't any services that would be required. The density of development that's allowed absolutely wouldn't require any services. I just wonder if you're familiar with state water policy and how it's not so good to have these great big sewer plants, and recharging the water locally is always the better option, and larger sewers mean larger risks of spills. Septic tanks are better because you have risks of smaller isolated spills, and these folks, they just don't want to be part of it. Why not stop at the river? Why do you want the floodplains? There's no risk of development interfering with your airport. There's just none, and it's disingenuous to imply otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Ostrich?
Ostrich.
Mark. Mark.
Thank you. I appeared before you a few weeks ago on behalf of TXI Riverside Cement and addressed some of these issues. And I just wanted to say for the record that we strongly support the compromise that City Manager Cox was describing to you. I know there were a couple of questions about whether he believed that everyone in the room was in agreement with where we ended up after this meeting a few days ago. From our perspective, we strongly support that. We obviously have no objection if the community of Oro Grande follows along and is left out. And there was one other mining company, James Hardy, that was represented at the meeting. They were consistently in the same camp as TXI, and there are other mining companies, VIM, Vulcan, that are out there that we've spoken with, and they feel the same way. So their issues would all be addressed by the compromise that Mr. Cox has suggested. So I just want to tell you that we strongly support TXI Riverside Cement strongly supports that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cox?
Because of the ongoing questions and comments and inquiry, I asked the council to schedule this as a study session so that we could bring you up to date and file the additional information that we may have with LAFCO, and they can proceed then with this hearing on June 16. For as we know, we have no further input into the process. It's the applications and the agreements that we've arrived at is in their hands, and at this point, I think we wait on LAFCO and their staff reports.
I would like to see an app that apparently isn't yet in existence with actual boundaries that would be tested at this point in time. Apparently, it's not reflected on slide 1 or slide 2. And so I would be curious to see what the results of that meeting a week or 10 days ago really bring about.
We will work with LAFCO, and as soon as that map is available, I'm sure it'll have wide distribution.
Thank you. We're now going to item number 4, which is closed session.
I'm going to recuse myself from that.
Mayor Cabarrellis, we do have a closed session. I'll wait till Mr. Well, actually, the agenda item is CMB Export LLC versus the City of Victorville. Case number CIVVS 901467. Going into closed session pursuant to Government Code 54956.9A, and to the extent there is reportable action, we will come out and report that action. All right, we do have reportable action this evening in connection with item number 4, the litigation CMB Export LLC versus the City of Victorville, case number CIVVS 901467. The council, on a 4-0 vote with council member Caldwell abstaining and not participating in the discussion, voted to approve a settlement agreement with CMB. The essence of the settlement agreement is that it will settle all claims related to a case filed by CMB and their affiliates against the city, the redevelopment agency, the airport authority, and former city manager Mr. Roberts and council member Caldwell. The original demand in the lawsuit was for $33 million plus punitive damages. This is a global settlement for the amount of $200,000. The $200,000 settlement amount is consideration only for the breach of contract claims. Consideration for the dismissal of the fraud claims and the misrepresentation claims is the agreement on behalf of Mr. Roberts and Mr. Caldwell to refrain from filing or to take off calendar, the summary judgment motions and the motions for sanctions. Again, it's a settlement of the entire piece of litigation, and the council voted 4-0 to approve it.